My name's David Wordley. I'm based in the UK. I'm a freelance consultant. I have many different interests, but my primary interest is in how technology is impacting society and business. And in one of my previous roles, I was the founding director of the Serious Games Institute. And so for a number of years, I've been involved in developing theory and practice for games, serious use of games and gamification. And today I want to talk about how games and gamification can be influencers in addressing global challenges. So I'm going to first of all just very briefly talk about global challenges, and we have many of them, but I'm just going to mention three and focus primarily on one of those. I'm going to talk about behavior change and the importance of that in these global challenges, and then give you some of my theory based on a number of years working with gamification and serious games on what gamification actually is and how it's used in preventative healthcare, and also very briefly on climate change. So we have many global challenges, and some of the most important ones that are exercising our attention today are healthcare and the unsustainability of healthcare services with the rise of non-communicable diseases and the challenges of the aging society. Climate change also is a serious problem. And as we've been talking about, war is also a global challenge. Now, I think one of the things that you can say about all of these is that behavioural change is an important factor in having some sort of influence on outcomes. And one of the problems that we face today, largely as a result of the technologies that we use every day, is that we are becoming something of a spectator society. In other words, we observe what's happening in the world. If it doesn't affect us, we don't get involved. Or if it's going to cause us problems, we don't get involved. And I'm sure that's certainly true of the problems with violence against women. Is that people tend to stand and watch rather than getting involved and trying to do something about it. So behavioural change is becoming, I think, a little bit more difficult as a result of the technologies we use every day. These are some of the important factors in behavioural change. Probably the most important thing is whether the problem or the situation actually affects you in some way. If it doesn't affect you in some way, you're less likely to change your behaviours. The second thing is whether you can do anything about it. If there is a problem, you're not going to change your behaviour if there's nothing you can do. And the other factors are what it's going to cost you if you do anything. If you get involved in stopping an argument or stopping a rape, what is going to be the price you'll have to pay, possibly, for that involvement? And will your actions actually make any difference? And finally, and it's one of the motivators for gamification, is what's in it for me? What benefit can I get from gamification? So to look at what a game is, I have my own views and ideas on the game, and I say that all living creatures use games and gamification, including animals. And if you've ever had a pet, you'll know that your dog gamifies its relationship with you, because if it wants something to eat, it will come up and it will look with those pleading eyes. It will hold its paw up to you. And this is a form of gamification. It's trying to influence your behavior. And the same with children. Babies learn how to manipulate, if you want to use that word, their parents. They use gamification as a form. They create challenges for parents, whether it's crying out loud and wanting attention, but they're masters at the art. And older people, as we get older, we probably, as we get used to the rhythm of life, we tend to use gamification less. But there are ways in which all of us in our lives use gamification to achieve an outcome. So games, I believe, are part of our DNA. It's a part of DNA of all living creatures. And I describe a game as a challenge with an uncertain outcome. Now, there are some challenges which have certain outcomes, and that I wouldn't describe as a game, because if you don't know what the outcome is going to be, it can't possibly be a game. It's got to have an uncertain outcome. And so, in my opinion, life is a game. Life is full of uncertain outcomes, and it's full of challenges. And I saw this quote once: life is like a game of golf. You can never master it, but perseverance brings rewards. You can practice and practice, but you will never ever be a perfect golfer. And that's one of the motivations and one of the reasons why people continue to play golf, because there's always a challenge, and there's always a challenge that you're trying to master. So when you look at games, what makes a game serious? I mean, the word serious and game don't seem to go together, because we tend to think of games as being enjoyment. But even games like doctors and nurses, children playing doctors and nurses, they are learning something in the process. So there is a serious element to it. And simulation, particularly medical simulations, are also examples of the way in which you can use games technologies in a serious way. So that brings us to the question: what is gamification then? If we know what games are and they're part of everyday life, what is gamification, and how can I use gamification, and how can I gamify any situation? Well, my argument is that every human activity can be viewed as a game. Every single thing that we do in our relationships, particularly, every activity that we have in life, you can view it as a game. It's a challenge. So the ability to gamify, I think, is a life skill. It might be embedded in our DNA, but we learn how to gamify a situation. Animals are very good at it. Animals are very good at developing relationships with their owners, and they learn the triggers that they can use to get fed, to be taken for a walk, and what have you. And it's the same with babies and young children. So this is one of my theories, or part of theory, and I say there is such a thing as a gamification cycle, which begins with a challenge, and that challenge has to lead to some kind of desired outcome. So if there is a desired outcome, you respond to that challenge. And when you respond to that challenge, there is some outcome. It may not be the desired outcome, but there is some change. But you need, in order to be able to gamify, you need to be able to measure what the outcome of your response is and provide feedback. And the thing about the gamification cycle is that what works for one person doesn't work for everybody. So gamification is highly personalized. So what will be a challenge for one person won't be a challenge for another person. What will be of interest to one person won't be of interest to another person. So when you're gamifying any situation, you need to understand the psychology and the situation of the participants involved in your game. So these are the main elements. There are many more elements, but the important ones are: it involves a challenge and a desired outcome which is relevant to you or the participant. It involves a response in order to progress the desired outcome, an ability to measure how you're getting on, what the impact of your response is, and then the feedback and visualization of how well you're doing. And then finally, some form of debriefing or reflection, which leads then to a revised challenge as you learn how to deal with the original problem. So when you're looking at the development of games, any kind of game, there are many more elements than just those. And I show a number of these here, which you will find embedded in some way in virtually every game to some extent or other. The other thing I want to mention, which I think is very relevant when we're talking about the situation in Russia and Ukraine, because war in many ways can be viewed as a game. It's a very serious game. And there are different players in the game, in any kind of game. But if you look at, I use the example of sport, where the key influence, I call them the games master. They are, if you like, the boss of the team, the coach who has the strategy. And in his strategy is able to get the most out of his players. So the next level down is the players who also have an influence on the outcome. And then below that are what I call the funds. And funds are very important in the sustainability of games because they are the ones that actually provide their time and attention that keep the game going. And below those, we have people levels of less interest from a spectator, and finally the hermit who really has absolutely no interest and is probably unaware of the situation. So in a wartime situation and what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, we have these roles. We have Vladimir Putin and Zelensky as being the coaches and the strategists. And then underneath them, they have the soldiers and the people involved in the battle. And then underneath them, the fans, these are people like us in the UK and many other countries who are not fighting, but we are providing resources. We are putting our time, our attention, our support into it. And then you go below that and you get some people who are not affected by the war. They just look on and don't actually contribute anything. And finally, there are probably some people in the world, it's hard to imagine, who absolutely are not unaware of it. They have no interest in what's going on in the situation. So if you want to learn about gamification, the best teachers are animals, pets, and children. You watch their behaviors as they challenge you, and you will learn some of the techniques and strategies. And why is it important today? Because we live in an attention economy. We have very short attention spans. There are so many things that we're facing every day that it's difficult to gain enough attention and traction to get some sort of influence. And so when we look at the attention economy, the next generation, the children of today, they've got very different expectations to the ones that I had as a child. That little girl there saying, entertain me, teach me, because they demand something to engage their interest. Now, looking at gamification in preventative healthcare, we have a very serious situation. Non-communicable disease, particularly things like obesity, are really serious problems, and they're a result of lifestyle behaviors. And these behaviors have put a big strain on our public health resources. You can see in different countries the level of obesity is quite severe, and of course we have these other distractions, attractive distractions like fast food and television entertainment. All of these really reduce the physical and mental challenges that we need in our lives to maintain our health. But games in health and medicine and wellness are not new. This is an example of a game that was developed to address the plague of London. It was called Ring a Ring of Roses, and it was designed to teach children how to avoid the plague. So the types of games and gamification in health, there are games which relate to education, and these can be education about medical problems. There are games which are actually therapies in themselves, and the game that you see here is a therapy for young cancer patients, which is designed to gauge their attention and take their mind off it, and it also gives them a feeling of control over it. And there are games that are specifically designed to influence our behaviors. This is an example of a game, a coronavirus game, which I developed to educate people about coronavirus and the importance of wearing masks, etc. So we do need to transition from cure to prevention. Digital health technologies are a very important component of that, I have, oops, you can't see them, but I have actually two devices. I have a Fitbit Sense and a new one from China, which is able to measure blood pressure. It's measuring my glucose levels. Whole range of different things are possible now. And it's the mobile applications, which are games in themselves, to motivate you to eat more healthily, to sleep, to have proper hydration, etc. And this is what it did for me. These pictures on the left-hand side are what I look like. The one on the far left is what I looked like in the 1990s. The next one is what I looked like in the middle 2000s, and 2013 is when I decided to do something about it. And I gamified my own health using these kind of technologies. And you can see within 3 months, I lost 21 kilos. So I do know these strategies work. Finally, just to mention briefly that gamification is also used in climate change. There's a couple of examples. One is a team-based game called the climate change game, where you are given some information and you make decisions which are going to impact the climate, and you learn the effects of climate change in that process. The other game, which is again quite old, going back to 2007, called Flood Sim, which is where you are playing a game where you're in charge of flood defence policy in the UK. You're given an amount of money and you're told what you can spend the money on, and you see the results of your decisions. And in the process, you learn more about flooding and climate change. So what I'd say to you is you can benefit from learning how to gamify. One of the most solitary lessons I have was when I started to lose my weight. I set myself a challenge of walking 5 miles every day. And I really didn't know whether that was going to help me or not. But 10,000 steps was what everybody said, and that's what I started out. And it paid dividends for me. And would you believe that ever since 9 years ago when I started, I've walked 5 miles every day, and I probably only missed about a handful of days. So every day I still walk 5 miles, but I've learned that it's actually diet that is even more important than exercise. So to summarize, the main elements, if you're going to gamify, you need to create a challenge with an outcome that is desirable to whoever you're gamifying. So you could tell your child, I want you to wash the car. That's your challenge. You wash the car. What's your desired outcome? I'm going to give you £1 in pocket money. So that's and then this cycle goes on, but these are the key elements that you need to worry about. So thank you very much for listening. I probably did it just about 15 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, so I do apologize for that.